and the question is a simple one. Have you ever been hungry? Like hungry, not, oh, I need a Snicker bar and that's all, because you're a little grumpy. I'm talking about, have you ever really been hungry? You know, it's interesting. We live in a world, our corner of the world, right? In America, I don't know if we fully understand maybe what hunger is. You realize that every year in our country we throw away $43 billion worth of unspoiled food. We just buy it, we decide we don't want it, and we throw it away. I'm not talking about the stuff you leave in the back of your refrigerator for 6 months and it grows something else and then you get rid of it because you can't eat it anymore. I'm talking about just good, normal, edible food. $43 billion every year that we just throw away. And for most of us, hunger is, I'm a few minutes late to when I want to eat, or maybe hunger is I didn't get that, that third piece of dessert or something like that. And I don't know if we understand in our world hunger, but if you look in the Bible, and this theme of hunger comes up often. It comes up regularly because in that world, hunger was a real thing. I mean, the average person would eat one or two meals a day, and they weren't meals where you get all that you want. It was just small meals and just a little bit of food. And starvation was a very real sort of reality of life, which is why several times, and if you look, and maybe as you're reading through the Bible and reading parts of it, you'll notice this idea, this thought, this theme of hunger comes up. Jesus uses it as even to point to spiritual things. One of the Beatitudes is, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied." And we see people all the time being hungry, and we see Jesus meeting those needs because it was a real thing. It wasn't like for us where, the average American eats twice the number of calories you need to survive, and we enjoy it. But for them, hunger was a real thing, a life or death kind of thing. And they didn't have, the ability to store food like we do. They couldn't run to H-E-B to get when they forgot something. We sent my son to the store twice yesterday because we went to the store that morning and we forgot two things. And like, hey, you go get it. You got a car, I'm paying for that. Go get my food, right? Because we didn't have it, and we have those abilities. Well, in the Bible, they didn't have that. That wasn't an option for them. And so what we see is that and some of the stories and some of the interactions with Jesus and with others, that hunger actually is almost like it's one of the characters. It's one of the things that comes out time and time again. And the story we're going to look at today, hunger is almost like one of the characters. It's a part of the story. We're going through the book of John, and we're looking at a variety, at these 7 miracles that John records that Jesus performed that point to who Jesus is and the life that we can have through him. And we come to a story today that for some of you is going to be familiar. For some of you, you're going to have heard before. And my prayer is that even though we're familiar with this story, that God would open our eyes and show us something new. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in John chapter 6, starting in verse 5. And here's what it says to us. It says this: lifting up his eyes, this is Jesus, lifting up his eyes, then and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" And he said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" And Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. And Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." And so they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." So here we have this story, right? And it's a story with a crowd of people, like 5,000 men. And so that means that when you count the women and children, there were thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people there. It's like a football stadium full of people that were trying to get close to Jesus. They wanted to hear his teaching. They wanted to be touched by him. Many were coming who were sick and lame and broken and hurting. And Jesus was healing them and doing all of these amazing miracles. And so it was just this crowd just all around him wanting to be close to him. And it probably, and I can't say this for sure, but the way that when you sort of look at it in the context and look at all of the Gospels accounts of the story, it seemed like they had been around Jesus for several days now. It wasn't just like a show up and, hey, let's give a couple hours. No, for several days this crowd had been around Jesus and had probably been growing. And they were getting hungry. And it wasn't that Jesus could just say, hey, everybody head down to Chick-fil-A because the Christian chicken, right? And go get that and then come back and meet me later on and we'll go. And it wasn't like if you've been to a conference, like, if I go to a conference, I try to sit next to the exit so I can get out really fast and beat the crowds to the restaurants, And some of y'all, you come to the first or the second hour so you can get there first, right? You can get to the restaurant first because we want to beat all the crowds. They didn't have those kinds of options. They couldn't go back to their ice chest and get their sandwiches even. They just didn't have options to get food. And they were sort of out far from any of the cities. And so Jesus looks at one of his disciples and he looks at this guy named Philip and he asks Philip a question. Where are we going to get the bread to feed these people? They're hungry. They don't eat a lot anyway. And really wasn't even trying to feed him a great meal. He just says, where are we going to get the money to give these guys some bread? And we don't know why. It's interesting to me. And I worked to try to figure out why did he ask Philip? Because Philip's not someone that even shows up that often. In fact, I'll bet if I were to ask most of you to name the 12 disciples, most of you would not even know that Philip was one of them. He's not like one of the famous ones. He's not one of the ones that we hear his story off. He's not one of the ones that we talk about. We don't have like a, little Philip on the flannel board that you put when you're kids, right? Philip's not one that we know much about. In fact, all that we really know about him is that he was a disciple. In fact, he started out as a disciple of John the Baptist. And then when Jesus came along, he switched and brought Nathaniel along with him. So hey, there was another guy named Nathaniel, if you didn't know that. And you're learning all kinds of trivia today, okay? And so brings him along. They start to follow Jesus, and Philip doesn't say much. Every now and then he shows up. One of maybe the most important questions he ever asked Jesus was, Jesus had been talking about the Father, and Philip says, hey, Jesus, can you show us the Father? You keep talking about him. You keep talking about how you're his son, and can you show us the Father? And Jesus says to Philip, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, because the Father and I are one. That's a big theological statement that sort of helps us understand who Jesus is. And Philip asked the question that set that up. But here Jesus turns to Philip and says, Philip, how are we going to buy bread for all these people? Now, I think Philip was probably the accountant of the group, because he does what I did when I was studying, and he immediately does the calculation. Right? He starts to do it in his mind. And he goes, you know what, we got, let's just say there's 10,000 people, $5 a person. That's $50,000. That's about a year's salary. Hey, Jesus, we would need about a year's salary to feed all these people. And guess what, Jesus? We don't have it. And even if we had the money, Jesus, there's no place to buy that much food. And even if we had the money and we could buy all that food, Jesus, guess what? We don't have the ability to prepare it and cook it and get everything ready for everyone. Jesus, there's no way we can do this. And he wasn't even calculating for like good food. This is like Taco Bell. We can't get Taco Bell for all of these people. We don't have enough. There's no way this is going to happen. Now, Jesus asked the question. It says it asked Philip the question, and he asked it knowing what he was going to do. And so they're all sitting around trying to figure out how they're going to feed all these hungry people. And then Andrew walks up. And again, we don't know much about Andrew, the brother of John, but Andrew's not helpful. Because Andrew walks up and says, I got to sack lunch. That's what he says. Right? And I would, if I were there, I would say, Andrew, go sit in the corner and let the big people handle this, because that's not going to help, is it? I've got thousands of people over here that I'm trying to figure out how to feed. And you walk up with some kid's sack lunch like that's going to make any difference, like that's going to matter in any way, shape, or form in anything we're doing. Just go away. And Jesus says, wait a minute. Go ahead and have everyone sit down. the other gospels say that when he had them sit down, he had them sit down in groups of 50 and 100. Go ahead and break off everybody into groups. Let's have everyone sit down. And then he takes this kid's lunch. In fact, the bread that in other places in Hebrew literature, this type of bread was called the bread of the poor. It wasn't anything fancy. It was some cheap bread and some dried up fish that they had salted and dried up so that they would last a little bit longer. And he prays over it. And he begins to break it and pass it out. And I don't know exactly how it happened. I sort of want to get to heaven so I can see how this thing worked out. Like did it multiply as he passed it out? Did he break it and just regenerate itself? I don't know how it happened, but he passes it out, and he passes it out to thousands of people. I don't care how fast you're breaking, that's a long time. And over the next minutes and probably hours, he breaks this off. And it says that everyone doesn't just get enough to eat, they are satisfied. This is like Thanksgiving dinner when you've eaten more than you can eat and you unbutton the top button of your pants and you sit down on the couch and watch a football game satisfied. This is when you've eaten so much that you look back and someone says, hey, you want some more? And you go, oh, I can't take another bite. And this was to a group of people that did not find satisfaction in their food often. Weren't used to having abundance, extra, more than they could handle. This is a people who, whenever you put food in front of them, they ate it because they may not have food tomorrow. They may not have food next week, and they couldn't store it. They couldn't save it. So these were people who were not used to being satisfied, and they eat so much food. They have so much to eat that they just sit back and go, I can't take any more. And then Jesus says, hey, let's gather up all the stuff, all the leftovers. We're not going to waste anything. And there just happens, just by random chance, and if you believe that, you don't know Jesus, because it just so happens that there are 12 big baskets full of food. I'm not an expert, but how many disciples were there again? Oh yeah, there were 12, weren't there? And I get the feeling Jesus looked at them and says, all right, everybody grab a basket. Fill it up. One for each of you. Everyone, I want you to understand how I can take this sack lunch and I can not only feed everyone, but you get a leftover basket of food. So you're taken care of. Everyone's taken care of. Everything is great. And then they go on and like, okay, good job. Jesus fed the 5,000. Now I know that in our church family, that we come from different sort of backgrounds and we're on different places in our spiritual journey. I know there are some of you who have grown up in the church. You've been a Christian for as long as you can remember, maybe longer than you can remember, right? And you've heard stories like this your whole life. Some of you are new, and this is maybe the first time that you've heard this story. But if you're like me and you've heard this story, this was one of the stories that in Sunday school and vacation Bible school and every kids thing that I did growing up, this story seemed to come up. I do remember the flannel board. If you don't know what that is, Google it, okay? And I remember the teacher putting out those little fish and those little bread and talking about this story. I remember getting little cardboard or pieces of paper, construction paper, cut out to look like fish and look like bread, and writing all the things that we're going to do for Jesus and making and giving them to Him because He's going to do something great. And this story, if we're not careful, becomes one we're familiar with, and it can almost even become a kid's story, because quite honestly, of all the things Jesus did, this doesn't seem like the biggest miracle, does it? I mean, Jesus raised people from the dead. Jesus healed people of all kinds of incurable diseases. Jesus feeding a bunch of people who didn't plan ahead is almost like, what's the big deal? I mean, I maybe would have told him, you should have planned better, guys. Should have thought about this. Bring your own bread. Bring your own lunch. Take care of yourself. And so what is the big deal about this miracle? It is interesting that of all of the miracles in the Bible, all the miracles that we have recorded of Jesus, this is the only one that shows up in all four Gospels. Right? Of all the great things that Jesus did, all the things that He said, all the people that He healed, all the miracles that He performed, of all of them, this is the only one that God inspired and worked through people and said that, you know what, this one you need to know. In fact, it's a miracle that's so powerful that the people that were listening to it, that experienced it, that were there, that ate that food, they were so excited after it happened that they were ready to just say, all right, Jesus, we're ready to go to war with you over this. Not against you, but with you. You tell us, we'll pick up our swords, we'll pick up rocks, we'll pick up whatever we can find, and we will go fight Rome because we realize how big of a God you are and how you can do something amazing with something with something small. And so this miracle had great meaning to the people seeing it. But God challenged me a little bit this week. He even challenged my understanding of this story that I have that I've read my whole life. And there's a question that kept coming up as I was working through this, as I was studying this, and the question was simply this: what does God want from you? I want to be careful here, and I want you to hear what I'm saying, and please don't take it too far, because I think God deserves every part of our life, doesn't He? I mean, He deserves every part of your life, your time, your talent, your treasure, your passion, everything that you are, every part of you, He genuinely deserves it. But I don't always give God every part of my life. And I don't think you do either. I mean, we try, and we do maybe better than others, but sometimes we struggle. Because sometimes we don't know how, and sometimes we get so sucked into living in this life that we forget that, God deserves and should be the in control of every part of our lives. And sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes we don't know what to do, and so sometimes we don't give Him everything. So the question is, will Jesus take my sack lunch? I mean, if that's all I have to give Him, will He take my sack lunch, and will it make any difference? I mean, what if in this moment, even if it's my own sin and selfishness, I can't give Jesus everything, but I can give Him something, will he take it? This boy did not have much to offer Jesus, did he? He really didn't. And I'm not even sure, if you look at the story, he didn't even offer. It's almost like Andrew's a bully and taking the kid's lunch from him. Here, Jesus, here, I got this kid's lunch. And the poor kid, he's sitting there going maybe I wanted to eat that. I don't know. I mean, I'm hungry too, like everybody else. And Andrew takes him and says, here, we've got this one kid with this one sack lunch. And we don't even see that the kid had any faith or any belief that God was going to do anything great with it. He just said, here's what I've got. And God took this lunch, this small gift. He didn't send the kid back home and says, bring all your food from your house. He didn't yell at the people because they didn't bring more. He just took this lunch and He fed thousands of people with it. He did the miraculous with something so very small. And so this morning, what I want to encourage you to do is think about what it looks like for you to bring a sack lunch to Jesus. I wish I could tell you, hey, you need to just bring Him everything, and yeah, you should, and yes, you should give Him all of your life, and it's worth it, and it's best, and He'll do amazing things if you trust Him with your life, but maybe today it's just taking one step and bringing your sack lunch to Jesus. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? Let me just give you a few thoughts. Maybe for some of us it means that we need to listen to His words. Every day you and I have questions and opportunities and challenges that come before us. And it really is easy for us to just start working and start doing, isn't it? I've got this question. I got to figure out the answer. I've got this opportunity. I got to know what to do. I've got this challenge. I have to work hard to overcome it. But what if we took just one of those? One question we have, one opportunity that we have, one challenge that we're facing, and we just said, you know what, Jesus? I'm going to sit in the grass. Just like He told the people there that day, I'm going to sit in the grass and I'm going to listen to You, and I'm going to do what You say with this one thing. You know, if I had been there, you know what the smart thing would have been? The smart thing would have been to leave before the crowds and get some food before everyone else took everything that was around there to eat. But if you'd left early that day, you'd have missed out on the miracle. And I think, what if we stop every now and then and just say, God, I'm not sure I know what to do, but you do. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait and I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to do what you say because I need you to do a miracle. It's only one area. It's only one small thing, but I don't want to miss what you want to do in my life right here. So one of my challenges for you this morning is to write down. Like you got paper there in front of you, maybe pull out a pen. You don't have to turn it in. You don't have to show anyone else. But just write down one question, one challenge, one opportunity that you're facing and say, God, I will listen to you in this one area. Now, if you do it, be careful. Because God may ask you to do something that seems a little bit crazy, like feed thousands of people with the kids' sack lunch. Like forgive that person that hurts you. Like give when it doesn't seem like you have enough to give. Like take that step of faith when you don't have all the answers. But maybe we just listen. Maybe we just stop. Maybe we just trust in one small area of our life and watch God not only answer, but watch Him do the miraculous and show us that He's more than enough. And something else encourage us to do is simply to know what you have. You do realize that if you've come to that place where you've admitted that you're a sinner and you've asked Jesus to forgive you and to make you one of His children, that He adopts you into His family and He becomes your heavenly Father. And that when He becomes your Father, He gives you gifts and abilities and resources. And again, it may not seem like much, but the little that we have is more than enough more than enough in the hands of Jesus. One of the things I really dislike about our world, this world that we live in, is that so much of this world gives us this message that you're not enough. You're not good looking enough. You're not smart enough. You're not rich enough. You're not successful enough. You don't measure up. So, by the way, we're selling this thing that will make you enough. So go ahead and buy it. But if it doesn't work out, guess what? We got something else that'll make you enough. And just keep buying. Just keep believing. Just keep pursuing. Just keep going after these things. And maybe one day you'll measure up and be enough. I want to tell you, you are more than enough in the hands of Jesus. He did not make a mistake when He made you. He did not make a mistake when He created you. He did not make a mistake when He gave you what you have. You are more than enough. So maybe say, you know what, God, this is all I've got, and I'm going to give it to you. You don't have to impress anyone else. Like hear that this morning. You don't have to impress someone else. God says you're enough the way you are. Will you give part, something, step, move to saying, God, here's the life that I have. You do something with it. I was listening to a pastor preach. One of the things I do is because just so I can be encouraged and fed in my own spiritual life, and thankful for this world we live in where I have other pastors that I get to listen to. And I was listening to this one, and I really do like him, and he said something a couple of weeks ago that at first really bothered me, because he said, look, hey guys, I want you to be the best teachers that you can. And so if you're a pastor and you're preaching with notes, these were his exact words, you're letting people down because you're a distraction to the message that God has. And buy my book and I'll show you how to preach without notes. And it made me upset because I'm sorry, apparently I'm letting you down. Okay, it's not my intention, but I feel like that because my brain is not sharp enough to be able to preach and do well without notes, and I need to keep on track. It's just who I am, and I've tried, but this is who I am. And I was starting to feel a little bit bad about myself until God whispers and goes, why are you listening to him? Listen to me, you're enough. God doesn't need me to be like someone else. He doesn't need you to be like someone else. He needs you to be the man or woman He made you to be, and to say, you know what, here's my sack lunch. It's not much. No one's impressed with the sack lunch. No one says, hey, honey, let's go out on our anniversary and have a sack lunch. It's not a big deal until you put it in the hands of Jesus. And He begins to break it apart and pass it out and change lives. What if you said, God, here's what I've got. It's not much. Here's the time. Here's the experiences. Here's the resources. Here's the skills I have. It's not much, but take it and do something with it. And so maybe you need to write down this week, God, here's what I've had. You take it. Here's what I've got. It's not much, but you take it. Which leads to the third thing I think this story teaches us is make sure we do not waste what God gives you. A lot of us struggle understanding God because we are limited and He isn't. That makes sense? Like so much of our lives is defined by our limits. We have a certain number of days. We don't know them, but we know that we're born and we're going to die unless Jesus comes back first. So we know our days are limited. And we have a certain limited amount of energy, and we have a limited amount of resources, and we have a limited amount of health, and we have a limited amount of everything. A mental, a skill, abilities. We're limited in everything that we do. And so I remember when you're young, you tend to sort of ignore your limits and think that, hey, I'm never going to be limited, so I'm just going to focus on all the great things I can do now because I'm young, and we ignore those limits. And when we get older, we tend to have maybe some regrets because we wish we had done something different or spent our time or the limited things that we have differently. And so it's that cycle, and I see it in so many people time and time again. But God is not limited. And so we have to sort of make a decision since we are. What are we going to do with the limited things that we have, and are we going to waste them? Emily and I were flying not long ago and getting on an airplane, and in front of us was this mom with her first child, and I think she had 15 suitcases and bags with her. Right, it's the first time she's flying. And I remember that we're flying. By the time you get to the third kid, it's like just drag that bag behind you, honey. That's all you need, right? It doesn't need much, but she had everything. She had the boppy, and she had the car seat, and she had all these toys, and she had all that stuff. And I were standing there going, "Oh man, I am so glad my kids can carry their own junk now." I mean, that's serious. Like, it is a great day when your kids, and if you forget or you leave it, that's on you because you're old enough to keep up with your own stuff. So don't come whining to me when you can't carry your little bag with your little whatever it is that you need. And I love that. It's a great day. And we're just sort of talking. We're even talking to her about it and laughing like, man, it's a good day when your kids can carry your own stuff. And then Emily looked at me and goes, but I miss it. Because my baby is 6'2", and I can't put him in my arms now if I wanted to, and it would be really awkward if I did. Like put him in that little, she had that little baby in that little thing, that front-facing thing. Can you see Nate? That would be, come on, Nate. Come on, bud. Help me out, son. He's back there like, Dad, just don't even try. But it goes fast, doesn't it? So why do we waste so much of our lives on things that don't matter? I hear people all the time, I don't have time to read the Bible. I don't have time to serve. I don't have time to contribute. I don't have time to whatever it is. But man, hey, I'm going to binge watch an entire series of CSI or whatever it is in one weekend on Netflix. Or I'm going to watch 10 football games in one weekend. Or I'm going to shop until I don't have any money left, and then I'm going to put on a credit card because, I'll pay that off tomorrow. And it's not that those things are wrong in and of themselves unless they keep us from God's best. And so what if we looked at our lives and said, God, how am I wasting it? How am I wasting it? What am I spending my time and my talent and my resources on that really isn't going to matter all that much one day? And what if I just took one of those areas and said, I'm going to spend that on you and your kingdom, Jesus? you might just see something miraculous happen. You might just realize that all the junk that we waste our lives pursuing is not really going to matter. But that person who is hungry for Jesus, that I invite into my home and I talk to them and get to know them and love them and care for them and have the opportunity to tell them about Him, that maybe that is going to make an eternal difference. So all I've got is my little sack lunch. I don't have much. But why waste it on things that don't really matter? Listen, I don't want to give you, I don't want to come here today and sort of give you an excuse for wasting your life, or just like, hey, don't give Jesus everything, because I really do. I'm telling you, it's best when we give Him everything. But I do want to challenge you. And I do want to encourage you. I do want to push on you just a little bit, and maybe say to you, what if we realize that God, here's the sack lunch that I have. Here's a little bit of time. Here's a little bit of talent. Here's a little bit of my passion. Here's a little bit of whatever. God, I just want to give to you this, and you do what you want to with it. What did this boy get out of this whole thing? Okay, he traded his lunch for lunch, right? I mean, he didn't get everyone else. He didn't get the leftovers even. He just got lunch out of it. And he saw God take his lunch and do and change and impact thousands of people. So you may look at your life and think, I don't have much. But put it in the hands of Jesus. Put it in the hands of Jesus and watch Him do the miraculous.